Well, hello and welcome back to Read Becca. We're going to do something new and exciting to the channel for the first time today. I am a massive library browser, and I kind of have a spidey sense for things on the shelf that seem interesting just by glimpsing the spine or the cover very, very often. And so I'm constantly pulling things off the shelf and looking at them that seem very intriguing that I haven't heard anyone talking about before. But then they almost always go back on the shelf because I have such a plethora and backlog of things I have heard lots of people talking about. And I think I want to uncover those hidden gems much more. I want to put a priority on that. So that is one of my goals for 2025. So for my first selection in my library treasure hunting in January, I've picked Dry Land by Pladek. This is not a super long book, but it is both historical fiction and fantasy, somehow in that small package. This book, at the time of recording this, has a mere 35 ratings and 10 reviews, with an average 4.11 rating. So I think this definitely qualifies as a hidden gem. Dry Land is focused on the story of Rand Brant, and very, very focused. It's quite a narrow focus book, and rightly so, I think. Rand is a young man who just recently got out of college. He went to Yale and has joined the Forestry Service. And he's very much a Midwestern, upper Midwest boy, but he also doesn't fit societal expectations and standards for the ideology he should have. He's very sort of soft leaning. He has a love of art and poetry, beauty and nature. And he's recently gotten into the writings of John Muir that leave him somewhat conflicted because he got into forestry for his love of nature, but he feels what they're doing, which seems to be primarily like clear cutting, in his day-to-day work doesn't seem in support of nature in the way that he thought his role was going to be. So that's at the beginning, our setup of learning who this character is. At the same time, he is learning more about himself and a magical gift he's uncovered that he has to grow things. So initially he's keeping this very bottled up because he doesn't know what it is. He's just sort of secreting away and sneaking off away from his crew because they're out on these long sort of logging expeditions. And he is sneaking away to test out what is this? What do I have? And he can literally just grow full trees to maturity in an afternoon. But he quickly realizes that this is a powerful gift, not just for himself, but he can do greater good through this, he thinks. And it's not something he can keep secret, mainly because this is the time of World War I, and there is a strong need for lumber in Europe near the front. So very quickly, he already had been signed up for the draft just by virtue of simply being a young man. So he tells his superiors in the Forestry Service, and very quickly they also recognize the power of this gift. And so as a result, basically his whole crew are kind of pressured into taking the option of going along with him to basically being a group of soldiers who are focused on logging. They're not right up at the front, but they are sent overseas into France, not terribly far away, in order to grow these massive swaths of trees and clear cut them. And so we see as a result of that Rand has this secret relationship as well. Much like himself, there's another man in his crew, Gabriel, who also doesn't quite fit and is a very soft-hearted person who plays violin, and that's his real passion and love. But he's joined the Forestry Service into this sort of manual labor career out of the pressures that society's placed on him to fit a certain mold. So he sees this impressment to go overseas as a potential freedom and the possibility of staying and living in France and the options that could open up to him to live a more free life. And so we're following this really beautiful and kind-hearted story between Rand and Gabriel as they really have a love, but a very conflicted love because they're obviously not going to be accepted. They can't live in open about who they are or who they love. And so that's such a beautiful and quiet story to follow. But they also face so many difficulties over the course of the story. And Rand finds himself very conflicted because of his situation, where he's keeping that secret internally about who he is and that he's gay, but he's also keeping another secret because as he's been progressing in learning his gift, he has learned that very often the things he grows will die and leave the land barren. So he doesn't know what that's about or what that means for their future once they get to Europe. And it could have great consequences if he can't deliver on this thing he feels he's promised. He feels in so many areas of his life that he's inadequate or not living up to the ideals that are expected of him by humanity and by those in power over him. So yeah, there are so many wonderful layers to the ways that the real historical and the magical are in conversation with each other throughout this book. I feel that the history was so grounded and tangible that I hate that this is my one critique. I just happen to have read Warm Hands of Ghosts fairly recently, and that has such overlap with the time and place and a lot of elements of the story. And that is such an atmospheric and beautifully written story that this doesn't quite live up to that. And I couldn't help making the comparison over and over. But this is such a wonderful character-focused story. It is very slow and about the human introspection. I haven't even mentioned one of Rand's best friends, or probably his best friend, is actually a woman who manages to make her way as a war correspondent into Europe following him. And she also sees this as a path to a free and open life. In a way, she's a lesbian as well. And so her being in the mix, like, she's such a dynamic character who really encourages him and provides a level of support. And we see their letters back and forth to one another, keeping under wraps who they are while also encouraging one another. And it's just very beautiful to see. So I loved seeing this story of a past that hasn't been explored as much as it should be, under the guise of telling this kind of magical story. And layering those two things together allowed the author to really explore the idea of human cultivation versus wilderness, and conservation versus preservation, and what really is man's role in nature. There were so many questions throughout this, and I don't feel that it necessarily reached a tidy ending, though most of the primary plot is this kind of exploration and mystery that he's trying to solve of what is this gift, how does it work, and what are the consequences of this. And it's not tidy in what it comes down to, but I think that as a thought experiment, this is highly, highly effective. So I wholeheartedly recommend that you pick up this book and give it a try. It, for me, was an absolute success in finding a great hidden gem. So successful first library treasure hunt, I think. And I certainly will be continuing on with this, hopefully for the remainder of the year. Hopefully we will uncover some more great hidden gems sitting on my library shelves. So with that, I will leave you and say thank you very much for watching.